Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're having a look at another devblog for updates 1.98, and it's time to have a look at the Attilio Regolo. This is a new Italian ship which is coming into the game, and it's going to be a light cruiser for Italy of rank 4. It's going to be the first light cruiser that you encounter in the tech tree for the Italians, so hopefully it puts people on the correct foot. But after having a look at it on the dev server and also reading this article, I don't think it's really going to do that. The fact that its tagline is that it's an upsized destroyer is not a good start, especially since this thing is mainly going to be playing against other cruisers, and as we know, cruisers in-game annihilate destroyers. But anyway, let's get into the history of this vehicle. So during the 1930s, the Regia Marina was looking into building a type of ocean scout vessel. The design work took inspiration from the Condottieri class cruiser, but was soon abandoned in favor of a more compact and also modern design. And by the end of the decade, the need for scout vessels became somewhat redundant thanks to the advancements in aviation and also radar technology. So as a result, the design was reclassified as a light cruiser and would eventually serve as a flotilla leader. The plans were made for the construction, 12 weeks of the Capitani Romani class of light cruisers, all of which were laid down in various Italian shipyards in September and October of 1939. There were only 3 ships of the class which would actually see completion though, while the others either had their construction cancelled or were later on captured in dry dock by German forces. One of the ships which did see completion is the one you see before you, the Attilio Regolo, which entered service with the Regia Marina in May 1942. The ship didn't really see extensive service though, until the fact that it joined the war late, so therefore it didn't see a lot of stuff going on, but also because it was hit by a torpedo from a British submarine, the HMS Unruffled, which I may just say is an amazing name for a submarine in November of the same year, and this severely crippled it. Post-war, though, the Attilio Regolo was handed over to the French in 1948 as part of the war reparations that they were to receive, and subsequently entered service with the French Navy as the Chateau Renaud. And the ship went on to serve with the French Navy until the early 1960s. It was then decommissioned and sold for scrap in the 70s, unfortunately, like a lot of ships that we know and love from history. So, the history of it is pretty simple. You know, you could definitely say it didn't have a huge impact in the war, but I think in War Thunder, I think it will have a bit more of an impact. The reason for this is because when you get a first vehicle, when it comes to a type in naval, it kind of sets a tone in a way. The fact is you want the tone to be set to be good. If you have a look at, let's say, the British destroyer line, for example, or the heavy cruiser line, the problem that you have is the first ship in that line sets an incredibly bad precedent compared to the ships, going forward. So stuff like the Hawkins, the Clemson, really not good machines compared to their counterparts. But the Attilio Regolo at least has a few defining characteristics which make it kind of interesting compared to its counterparts, even though I don't think it will be the strongest. So the first thing is the reason why this thing is seen as an upsized destroyer instead of a standard light cruiser is because of the main armament that this machine has. Instead of the standard 152s that you see on pretty much every other light cruiser, this thing is armed with 135mm. It has 8 of them, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. And it has 2 super firing turrets, which are found at the end, either end of the ship. And the general idea of these guns is that they will have a higher fire rate than, their 152mm counterparts, and this will counteract the amount of damage that they do. So obviously, because they're smaller caliber, they're going to do less damage compared to the 152s, but the idea is you can put out more power. And by, the reload speed. And this can be seen a lot, if you have a look at certain vessels in the game. The Americans always come to mind, the Porter class, stuff such as the Sumner, stuff such as the Somers, some of, in my opinion, the best gun destroyers in the game. And if you compare that to the high tier, German destroyers with the 150s, the high tier American ones that I just named, they can just keep firing, they can keep putting shells into the air, and they can keep donking on whatever you can find. The amount of games that I've had in the Porter class or the Somers class where I have just done ridiculous amount of damage because of the fire rates of those guns, not necessarily because of the guns, are very high caliber or anything, is astronomical. And with a ship like this, the Attilio Regolo, at least it has a chance of being able to do that, even if it isn't really going to be against other light cruisers. Because of the fact, once this thing gets hit, it's going to feel it very, very much. So, one of the problems that we have in cruisers in general, and this isn't actually just a problem with cruisers, it's a problem with naval in its entirety. The progression of how good a machine is very, very close to each other. So if you compare, let's say a 5.3 cruiser to a 5.7, the vast majority of the time, the 5.7 is going to absolutely slay the 5.3, and the 5.0 is going to get absolutely slayed. Sorry, the 5.0 will get absolutely slayed by the 5.3, and the 4.7 will get slayed by the 5.0. And it's actually, it's a greater gap between something like a 5.0 and a 4.7, because you're leaping from destroyers to light cruisers, and light cruisers are literally designed to annihilate destroyers. So what happens is you have these voids where most people want to just play the best vehicles, so you end up people playing a lot of 4.3, so they stay out of that 4.7, 5.7 bracket, or you get people who want to chance it at 4.7 and then, get into a game with 4 Oigans and they just annihilate you. Or you get people who are playing at 5.7 who dick on everything that are 5.3 and 5.0. Well, this is, the Attilio Regolo is one of those 5.0 machines. And one of the problems with 5.0 machines when it comes to cruisers is not necessarily the armament. As we said, the armament can be made up for because of its fire rate, but it's the armor. And this is the big difference between the big, annihilating cruisers and the not so annihilating ones. The armor and the amount of crew that they have is substantially different. This vehicle, the Attilio Regolo, does not really possess any armor on it at all. It has a little bit over the general, areas when it comes to its turret, its superstructure. Obviously, overall, it has a little bit, but it really doesn't have any if you compare to, belt armor, if you compare to, superstructure armor of many other cruisers that it's going to be facing. So every time you fire with these 135s, you are going to be, if you're facing light cruisers, which should be the majority of the time, because you're in that top BR bracket that we talked about, if you are firing, then you are going to be running into armor. You're going to be doing less damage, you got less caliber guns, therefore, less explosive mass on the shells, therefore less damage overall. And then you've got big boy cruisers over here with larger caliber guns, which do have a slower fire rate, but once they hit you, you're gonna stay hit. You're gonna get battered by it because of the fact that you have no armor. There is nothing to stop those shells coming in, and that means that against you, other cruisers can use HE, therefore they can use more explosive mass, therefore they can do crippling damage to you overall. So it's just one of those really horrific scenarios for this, where it isn't really the armament which lets it down, it's armor. And it's hopefully something that is rectified with other machines that we see when it comes to the general Italian Navy, but it seems like only the Trento right now is actually one which actually rectifies this. Another thing as well is it does have access to some secondary weapons, which should be nice against anti-air defense, and also smaller ships, or smaller boats, I should say. But generally, you're not going to face smaller boats, and also pretty much every other cruiser has an equivalent secondary armament. So it has 8 single 37s and 4 dual 20s. We need to see the range on these 20s, if I'm honest with you. That's a big factor when it comes to ships. I have talked about many times that when it comes to like the 20 millimeters on the German destroyers, it's really nice to have that amount of firepower and rate of fire, but it doesn't really matter if they open up at only about 1.5k when a plane is already setting up to bomb you. So we're going to have to see what the 20s look like for the Italians. The 37s I'm very happy with though. I think the 37s are going to be really nice overall for this machine. And once again, one of the selling factors for one of these larger Italian ships is its speed. Its speed is around about 70 kilometers an hour. So this puts it around about 5 to 10 kilometers an hour faster than other machines, which are at an equivalent BR. Now, I really don't think this is an achievement. I don't think this is something that will keep you alive. I don't think this is something which is going to really change the course of the battle. The change in speed is not significant enough in order for you to abuse it against enemies. We're not talking about like a plus 30 kilometer an hour difference or a 40 kilometer an hour difference. We're talking about 5, we're talking about 10 against most meta machines. And once people have lined guns up on you, as we've talked about in the past, you are taking significant damage when it comes to them, dealing with you, and that will be to your engines, that will be to your smoke funnels, that will slow you down, and then you'll be crippled, and then you'll be annihilated. And since you are such a large target, I don't think that extra little bit of speed is going to help you at all. It does have some nice torpedoes on it though. I will say all of the cruisers and destroyers have exactly the same torpedoes. By the way, they all go about 12 kilometers once fully upgraded, and they are pretty good, when they're not upgraded, they're horrific, at least on the dev server. They only go 3 kilometers, which is just not good enough. It really isn't good enough for destroyer or cruiser combat. It has 2 quadruple sets of 533s. It also has 4 spare torpedoes for the bow torpedo launcher. So if you want to be, if you want to be proper, you have to point the bow to the enemy to try and get some more torpedoes off, especially if you're playing realistic in general. But the thing is, it does have some nice characteristics. I want to see if its fire rate actually does do something to its amount of output when it comes to damage. And generally, you don't really expect too much from 5.0 cruisers, but at the same time, you want them to at least be able to somehow stand up to the 5.7s, which is what ultimately you're going to face a lot of the time. And I don't think this thing does it. I think this thing's going to get ammo-racked. I think this thing's going to get annihilated by stuff like the Brooklyn, the Helena, the Cleveland, the Eugen, the Graf Spee, and I don't think it's going to have a chance. And it's very sad to say, because looking at the Italian tech tree, rank 1 looks really cool. Rank 2 looks really cool. Rank 3 is light, let's say, but I think you can make a solid 4-3 lineup. The cruisers are looking pretty shocking right now, and this is one of them. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Conte Baraka, Daniel Stanton, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, Trigger Hippie, Eugene's Terry, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.